Thanks everyone for being here today. My name is Adam Greenstein. I'm the immediate past president of the Washington, D.C. section of ITE. We're proud today to have an event jointly hosted with our partners in the Mid-Atlantic section to our north and collaborated through the Mid-Colonial District. Our event today is a view of sign designs from the field. Are they innovative, unusual, MUTCD compliant? We have a huge crowd today, and I wanted to thank the boards for these different sections in the district for helping us get to this point today. Just a few housekeeping notes. Please remain muted today with your cameras off. Just to make it easier for everyone to see the screen, I'll turn my camera off as well when we get started. As you may have seen, the event's being recorded. Sorry about that. It will be posted to our section YouTube channel in the coming weeks. You'll get an email about that. If you have questions, you can use the Q&A feature at the top of your screen in Teams, or the chat will monitor those and answer questions at the end, and we'll try to answer them offline through email afterwards if we have questions that we can't get to by the time our meeting ends today. And also everyone will see a link from WDC's site on how to process PDHs through the ITE website. Wanted to quickly thank our sponsors for the 3 sections. You can find them on our website. We're also on social media, as you can see here, different section resources on different social media platforms, including YouTube, where you can find the video later. And just a quick plug for the Mid-Colonial District. We'll be having our district meeting in Pittsburgh in April. And with that, what I'm going to do is introduce Jonathan Upchurch real quick. Jonathan, I appreciate your patience through some of the technical issues, but I did want to give a chance for everyone to know who you are, and we'll move right into your presentation. So for those of you who do not know, Dr. Jonathan Upchurch has been an ITE member for over 50 years and served as ITE's international president in 1991. Twice during his career, he lived in the DC area and was a member of the Washington, DC section of ITE. Early in his career, he served on ITE staff, later as a congressional fellow. He was also on the staff of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee in the U.S. House of Representatives. He's attended 49 ITE annual meetings, and today is his 97th presentation at an ITE section, district, or international meeting, almost at that milestone. For 100, we'll get you there. Jonathan's been active in the National Committee on Uniform Traffic Control Devices for over 40 years. He's had an impact on the evolution of the MUTCD, which is the main topic today. He was deeply involved in the National Committee's review of the proposed 11th edition of the MUTCD, and we hope to see FHWA release that later this year, hopefully in the spring, for the final rule. And he's also a co-chair of a national committee effort to envision the 12th edition of the MUTCD. So once the next one comes out, he'll be leading the effort on the charge for the one down the line from there. And I will give the floor to Dr. Upchurch. Jonathan, is there anything you'd like to say before we get your recording underway here?
Thank you, Adam. Appreciate the introduction. And yes, for the audience, because we've had a little technical difficulties today, we're going to be presenting a recording of my presentation that we recorded recently. And then following the recording, I'll be happy to take questions and provide some answers to all of you. So thank you, Adam. Let it roll.
Sure, absolutely. I'm going to share my screen, and as a reminder, feel free to use the chat. We'll monitor that as best we can throughout the course of the event and answer them at the end. So let's get rolling here. You should be able to see the, let me stop sharing. Give me 1 second. I forgot one feature. I want to include the sound here. And we're going to try this again. Here we go. Thanks everyone for your patience again.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to be here today to share with you some great information about traffic control devices. I want to thank Adam, and I want to thank the Washington, D.C. section for inviting me to give this presentation, to share this information with you. We're going to have a very interesting time here during the next hour. Thank you for joining us. Before I begin with the main part of my presentation, I just want to make a comment about the forthcoming 11th edition of the MUTCD. Lots of people have been working very, very hard for a long, long time to produce this 11th edition. Members of the National Committee on Uniform Traffic Control Devices have been working since 2008, having made over 200 recommendations to Federal Highway Administration for changes to the manual. FHWA issued their notice of proposed rulemaking back in December of 2020, seeking comments from the public. Thousands of people responded. FHWA has made their way through those comments and is producing a final document. We hope that's out by May 15th of this year. That's a deadline that the bipartisan infrastructure bill gave to Federal Highway Administration for publishing the 11th edition. So we hope it's out within the coming months, and we all look forward to that very, very much. If you've already forgotten my name, I thought I'd insert this as just a little reminder of who I am. There's a backstory to my presentation. By the age of 21, I had visited 48 states. Then one Sunday in the newspaper, I saw this little question and answer that appeared. And the answer mentioned that there are over 3,000 counties in the United States. And I said to myself, wow, I wonder how many counties I visited. So I got myself a county map of the United States. I started coloring in the counties that I had already visited. I've been doing that ever since. And I've now visited about 2,770 of the 3,100 counties in the United States. And at about that same time, someone else inspired me to create a map showing all the routes that I had followed in my travels. So I've been working on that for quite a long time as well. And you can see from this map all the places I've traveled, some concentrations in some of the places that I've lived, including the Washington, D.C. area. Now, all of these travels have given me the opportunity to observe lots of different traffic engineering practices and treatments, various uses of traffic control devices. And that's what I'd like to share with all of you today. So let's look at some slides. Now, we're not going to look at pavement markings because there's aspects of pavement markings that are a little hard to convey, like the skip ratios on the dotted lines and other aspects of pavement markings. And we're not going to spend time talking about traffic signals because, again, there's many aspects of signals like cycle lengths and phasing and splits that are a little difficult to convey through images on the screen unless you happen to be talking about preemption, which is the name of a small community in the state of Illinois. So rather, we're going to be focusing today on signing. And I have to tell you that in part, this presentation was inspired by a feature that for many, many years appeared in the publication of the Western District of ITE. And that feature was entitled Sign of the Month. Might have been an unusual sign or a sign that made you chuckle a little bit. I assure you, you'll see some unusual things today and also some things that will make you smile. I want you to be very, very engaged in this presentation. You are going to see a lot of content, a lot of images. You're going to see some text on the screen, and you are going to need to be focused or you're going to miss something if you divert your attention just for a moment. But I want you in your mind, as you look at everything on the screen today, to ask yourself some questions. Is the sign innovative? Is it merely unusual? Is it compliant with the manual or not compliant? And how about the design of the sign? Good or poor in terms of legibility distance, in terms of how easily it's understood by the road user? And if the sign you see is not in the MUTCD, does that sign serve a purpose? Does it communicate well? Should it be added to the MUTCD? I want you to be thinking about all those things. And then finally, ask yourself the question, does it make you laugh? And I assure you some of these will. And I think from a learning standpoint, humor is often very effective in helping people learn something or remember something long after the fact. So my use of humor today is intended in part to help you retain some of the information and the knowledge that you see and that you hear today. Most of the slides that you're going to see on your screen this afternoon follow the format that you see here. On the right side, you'll see an image of a sign that's used out in the field. On the upper left, you may see a title that very succinctly describes what the topic is. Below that, you'll see an actual quote from the MUTCD, a provision from the manual that describes what the manual has to say. Below that, the questions I'm suggesting you think about, whether it's innovative, merely unusual, non-compliant. And then in the lower left, you see the geographic location at which I saw this sign. This is not the public agency that's responsible for the roadway or the signing. It's just the geographic locale. So you've probably heard of edge lane roads or advisory bike lanes. You may have seen an article in ITE Journal on this subject. Essentially, it's taking a narrower road, low volume, and putting some signing and marking on that road so that it can be used by both vehicles traveling in both directions, but also providing an area that's set aside for pedestrians and bicycles. So there are about 40 experimentations that are taking place around the country under formal requests to experiment that have been submitted to Federal Highway Administration that are looking at a variety of signing and marking that could be used to mark these kinds of roadways. As section 1A10 says, requests to experiment include field deployment for the purpose of testing or evaluating. The sign you see here, ask yourself some of those questions that I suggested. There's a lot of information on this sign, a lot of content to absorb and think about and to understand. So think about the legibility distance, think about the ability of the road user to understand what that message conveys. Now, I have not shown you all of this scene, and I've done that purposely because beneath this sign, there was also another sign, and that one really got me scratching my head. Here's another example of something that's not in the manual, but is probably being evaluated under a formal request to experiment. Think about a rural two-lane roadway, two-way, some type of temporary traffic control activity is taking place that's blocking one lane. So you have alternating one-way traffic on the remaining lane that's still open. And we have ways of controlling the traffic that's using that one lane. But what about vehicles that are entering this roadway from a side street or from a driveway? How do we communicate to them what's happening on that roadway? That there are alternating directions of travel going back and forth in that single lane that's open. Well, here in one jurisdiction is a sign that's used for those driveways or crossroads. That's one way of treating it. Here's another example, another method of treating it in another jurisdiction. Of course, we all know some of the basics about the MUTCD, such as the shape and the colors of a stop sign, but in spite of the fact that the manual says it shall be an octagon with a white legend and border on a red background, we do see other designs of stop signs from time to time. We want to make sure that signs are placed and installed properly, as it says here, in a uniform and consistent manner. Also, that maintenance is important. So what's unusual about this? Is it compliant or non-compliant? Here is an example. This is a cartoon that appeared in the New Yorker magazine. It obviously was some commentary on speed control in residential areas. This cartoon actually inspired a jurisdiction in Illinois to manufacture a similar sign that was actually installed, but the sign did not last for long. Federal Highway Administration encouraged this jurisdiction to remove that sign pretty quickly. There are lots of warning signs in the manual that have word messages. Many of those are very standardized. But do you know, the manual does say that highway agencies may develop special word message signs in situations where roadways users may need to be warned about a situation that might not be readily apparent. So yes, I suppose I am glad to know that there may be low-hanging branches up ahead. And of course, I'll want to avoid those. If there are eagles on the highway, I do not want to hit them. That would not be good. So perhaps that warning sign is useful. This one's quite unusual. It's sort of like an educational plaque to this warning sign, you might say. Yes, a situation that might not be expected by the road user, that there would be horses on the highway bridge. If a zip line is crossing the roadway up ahead, I suppose maybe I'd like to know that ahead of time so I wasn't so surprised when I saw someone flying above the roadway from one side of the road to another. I'm not quite sure what constitutes an important intersection. And I really grind my teeth when I see signs like these that suggest that an agency is admitting that they have a facility that is substandard or maybe deficient in some way. I have seen all kinds of messages on warning signs that describe the condition of the roadway up ahead. Again, being warned about a situation that might not be readily apparent. A rough break, whatever that might be. Surface breakup, that might be another way of describing it. An unimproved road surface, yes. This one really puzzles me. This is on a paved roadway, yet it says rough roads may exist. Not quite sure what message that's intending to convey. Of course, from time to time, we have local citizens who take matters into their own hands and may adjust the messaging on our signs. This person must have been an English major. They used a word that is not commonly used. And of course, here I'm sharing with you the definition of tremulent, easily shaken or disordered, trembling. Of course, when we do get graffiti like this, the manual does address that, saying maintenance activities should consider cleanliness, damaged signs, things that should be replaced. And you may have other unusual messages about conditions on the roadway as well. Sometimes the road messages are not exactly right, or maybe they are out of date. A road narrow sign should be used where the pavement width is reduced abruptly. In this case, I would say greatly reduced and very abruptly. Although the manual says that agencies can create their own word message signs, the manual has something different when it comes to symbol signs. An agency can use symbols that are a little bit different than those shown in the manual, but the manual says that those symbol designs shall in all cases be unmistakably similar to those shown in this manual and in the standard highway signs and markings book. This one I would say passes muster. This one, and I will admit this one is not from the United States, it is from Canada. Very interesting symbolic design. Multiple symbols on the sign. What exactly does that mean? Now, very interestingly, this is a sign that actually appears in the Canadian manual. And here it has an educational plaque associated with it, indicating that it's a freezing mist area and that there could be slippery conditions on the roadway. Australia also has some unusual symbol signs, but I have to admit that Australia has problems with graffiti, just like we have problems with graffiti here in the United States. Again, here are some symbols on a sign. Generally speaking, at least two of those symbols are not like symbols that you'll find in the MUTCD. One is intended to say no cell phone service, and the other to say that there's no food or beverage available on the roadway ahead. I've seen a lot of warning signs that deal with various types of wildlife crossing the roadway. Any things including moose, crocodile. They also are in the symbol form for ducks, mountain lions, bear. And if you go to other countries, you'll see them for kangaroos, camels. Who knows what you might see on the roadway. Sometimes you will find combinations of both symbols and word messages on signs, such as these. But you'll note here two different jurisdictions attempting to give just about the same message, but with symbols that are very different from one another. I don't know what a major sheep crossing is or a major deer crossing, but I will admit there is some innovation in the left-hand sign. It does have flashing yellow LEDs in the border of the sign. More symbol signs. This one from the Orlando, Florida area. But think about the legibility distance on this. There's a tremendous amount of fine detail in the design. How carefully do you have to look at this? What's the reading time that's needed to understand what that symbol means? And in the same jurisdiction, another very innovative symbol sign. Again, here are two different jurisdictions in different states. They're attempting to say just about the same thing. The symbols basically covers some of the same kinds of things to watch out for, but you'll notice that the symbols that are used are different in a couple cases there from one jurisdiction to another. And another example of a combination of word messages and symbols on a warning sign. I guess I'll have to say this one threw me for a loop. This was on a pathway. I was there on the ground. I saw it. the alignment of the path really didn't follow an alignment like shown on the sign. It baffled me a little bit. So that one was a puzzle. Again, sometimes local citizens like to take things into their own hands, providing their own commentary, such as adding wet when raining, dry when hot. And sometimes their messages in your mind can be quite graphic. Now here's an interesting question. The manual says signs should be individually installed on separate posts or mountings, except where one sign supplements another. So the question here is, are these two signs that supplement one another, or should they have been mounted on two different posts at two different locations approaching the side road? I'm showing you this particular sign because the yellow diamond, black on yellow diamond below, really doesn't comply with the manual. The manual says a supplemental warning plaque used in conjunction with a regulatory sign shall have a black legend and border on a yellow background, but it says that they shall be square or rectangular. Distance ahead plaques can be used to inform the road user of the distance to the condition that's indicated on the warning sign. So in this case, these signs are warning you that the pavement ends 22 miles ahead. But I have to ask myself, after 15 minutes or 20 minutes, am I going to have any memory of the message on this sign? Again, if I was driving a truck, it might be nice to know that 48 miles ahead, trucks are prohibited. But again, this is quite a great distance in advance to be presenting a message. If indeed there is no bridge at the river, that's really important to know. And I hope I don't forget in the next 4.5 miles. Next distance plaques may be used to inform road users of the length of roadway over which the condition indicated by the warning sign exists. So here, apparently, there is a bump that's 10 miles long. And here, apparently, there is a dip that's 19 miles long. This one strikes me as a little bit odd. School bus stop ahead, which sort of suggests to me that there is a single school bus stop ahead, but the supplemental plaque says next 11 miles. Sometimes the distances are quite long, but this one really got me thinking, wondering just how long is several miles? This is an installation that I found to be really unusual. Chevrons on a curve with an advisory speed plaque below every single chevron. I actually went to the MUTCD to see what the manual says about this. And the manual does say the advisory speed plaque may be used to supplement any warning sign. And a chevron is a warning sign. So it's my belief that this installation does comply with the manual. It's just that it's very, very unusual. Is this a narrow bridge or is this something else? In my mind, I think a road narrow sign would be more appropriate. If there are cracks in the road up ahead, yes, I guess I'd like to know that. Apparently, they potentially could be quite large. This was in an active earthquake area, so perhaps this sign is merely unusual. So at this point, you've seen a lot. I'd like to pause for a moment, pivot a little bit, and take a couple minutes here to share something else with you. I was giving this presentation last summer, and in the question and answer period at the end, someone asked, well, have you ever seen a sign on the roadway that you thought was inappropriate or might be hazardous in some way? And just 2 days earlier, I had driven past this scene on a roadway. This is a long downhill section of roadway, almost 4 miles long, about 5.5% grade, about 25 horizontal curves in that distance. And here you can see very clearly that the roadway is curving to the left. But there is a large arrow sign there with the arrow pointing to the right, as you can see more easily in the blow up to the upper right of your screen. I saw that sign and I said to myself, you know, that's just not right. And if it were dark, if it were foggy, if it were rainy, if there's an unfamiliar driver, that could be very, very confusing to the motorist. And then a month or so later in another state, I came upon this. You'll see the oncoming traffic, the white pickup truck is in a left turn lane. You see the other through lane and a right turn lane over on the left-hand side of the picture. Notice where the keep right sign is located. Again, under inclement weather or foggy or darkness, someone might look at that keep right sign and literally simply keep to the right of it and have a head-on collision. So the question here is, what should any of us do if we see something out on the roadway system that is hazardous, unsafe, could lead to a crash, injury, or death? What's our obligation? I'd like to note just for a moment, the ITE Canon of Ethics says that the member will guard against conditions that are dangerous or threatening to life, limb, or property on work for which the member is responsible, or if they're not responsible, will promptly call such conditions to the attention of those who are responsible. So under the ITE Canon of Ethics, what should an ITE member do when they see something like this? I did, and of course, when you see something out on the roadway, it's not always obvious who the roadway agency might be, who owns and operates the roadway. It may not be terribly easy to find out how to contact that agency or to contact an appropriate person at that agency to share with them your concern. In this particular instance, I did contact the highway agency involved, and within 24 hours of my sharing this with them, they did correct this particular sign, changed the arrow so it's pointing to the left instead of to the right. I suppose you could also ask the question, what if the situation was a little bit different? What if it turned out that you, the ITE member, are an employee of a consulting firm who happens to do work for the agency who owns and operates the roadway? That makes the situation perhaps a little more perilous. What if the public agency is not so receptive or is not happy to hear some criticism? Does that affect your action and what you do? Well, I think in terms of the canons of ethics, It's pretty clear that it's our obligation to safeguard life and property. It is our obligation to notify public agencies of concerns like these. But you need to use the right approach. You need to be tactful. You may want to consult with your colleagues within the firm, higher ups in the firm, to suggest how that public agency might be approached, to share with them your concern. So let's go back to looking at some more signs. Black on white. Gee, that's a regulatory sign, right? Well, I think the message here is more of a warning. I do agree, cars are dangerous. But this message really should be on a black and yellow diamond sign. Similarly, this is a warning sign, but it is designed and manufactured more like it's a regulatory sign. And this sign, I think, is a bit humorous. Does this mean that I've not been traveling at the legal speed? Sometimes, in spite of our best efforts, word messages are created that do not convey a clear, simple meaning. Note the text from section 1A02. A traffic control device should convey a clear, simple meaning. Well, what does this sign mean? It could mean a variety of things depending on how it's interpreted. Does it mean that the only time you may turn left is when there's a red indication? Or does it mean when the signal is red, the only permissible movement is to the left? Similarly, I think there are different ways for interpreting this sign. Is it that there's no camping overnight, but that parking is okay? Or is it that there's no camping, but overnight parking is allowed? And this one, I really have to scratch my head. The Sunday until noon, does that apply to the stop sign? Does that apply to the one-way street? Is the right turn permissible on Monday through Saturday? Will divine intervention protect me on Sunday morning? Couple different things wrong with this speed limit sign. The colors are wrong. The speed increment is wrong. Speed increments shall be in multiples of 5 miles an hour. This one, very unusual, a nighttime speed limit that's higher than the daytime speed limit. There were good reasons for that particular situation. How about this one? 55 miles an hour for a school zone speed limit. A two-lane, two-way rural highway, the advisory speed is 65 miles an hour. And the ramp speed is 75 miles an hour. Wow. Again, here's another black on white sign that's really not a regulatory sign. It's a warning sign. This one really befuddled me. You'll notice it's on a one-way street and it's facing a direction from which no one should be approaching. Still trying to figure out the purpose of that stop sign. What if I'm directionally challenged? The manual does say that you can use arrows on parking signs to show in which side of the sign the restriction is. And you can use begin, you can use end, you can use here to corner, you can say this side of the sign. But what if you're directionally challenged? What if it's a cloudy day? and it's really hard to figure out which way is north. For how long am I going to remember this message? Turn on headlights, next 100 miles. That's a long, long distance. And moving to construction signs. I think we're all frustrated by what appears to be construction or temporary traffic control signs that no longer seem to be appropriate, that there's no longer any activity going on. But this one sure beats a lot of the things you see out there. And of course, again, we have locals who are taking things into their own hands, providing their own commentary. Again, about there may no longer be activity on the roadway and the signs no longer needed. This signing, I've seen it multiple times over a long, long period of years. It appears in a particular state of the country where they give the distance to the 1,000th of a mile. Here's a portable sign. This one happens to be the state of Oregon. I'll call it the monochrome signal ahead sign. And I'm still wondering, what role do cows have in temporary traffic control? And I guess this one is just for emphasis. And again, we've almost come full circle here from one of the first slides that you saw, a two-way traffic sign. It should be used to remind road users of opposing vehicular traffic. But someone messed up on this one. Not in the 2009 manual, but it will be in the forthcoming 11th edition of the manual. Quick response codes shall not be displayed on any sign. And I think for obvious reasons. Guide signs. This one, highly unusual that the destinations being shown are for entire states. This one I have to ask, did they teach spell check at the elementary school? Six miles from where? General service signs may be used where such services are infrequent. And yes, here's a case where they must be very infrequent. I've seen a handful of states that have signs that let you know how far it is to the next passing lane, but in only one state have I seen this supplemental sign that says how long it will take you to get there. And I'm scratching my head on this one. If it's 6 miles away, how fast must I drive to get there in 5 minutes? Especially if I'm following a slow-moving vehicle. Is this a regulatory sign or is it a guide sign? Turning to bicycles. The hill warning sign may be installed on paths to warn bicycles of conditions that are not readily apparent. And yes, I guess if I was a bicyclist, I'd be glad to know that it was a 22% grade, but by golly, that strikes me as being awfully steep. This sign was actually installed by a state highway agency. It's suggesting do not rely on your GPS, your in-vehicle navigation. That is not the right way to go. That one installed by a public agency. This one also by a public agency in another state, suggesting don't rely on the times and the speeds that are shown on your in-vehicle navigation system. And then this one, again, locals taking things into their own hands, suggesting that you not a good idea to drive down their street. But I guess it is important to say that the manual says that any unauthorized traffic control device placed on the highway right-of-way by a private organization or individual constitutes a public nuisance and should be removed. Is this a condition that's not readily apparent? Again, locals like to get in on the act on their own, providing their own messaging along the roadway, their own commentary. And finally, I'll mention maintenance. Damaged signs should be replaced. That brings me close to the end of my presentation. Not a temporary end, but the end, and I will finish off with my all-time favorite traffic sign. I would like to thank all of you for coming today. I hope you took away some good information from this presentation. I hope you've learned some things about the manual. And from some of the things that you've seen, have a better understanding of how to do good traffic control device design and placement on the roadway system. Again, I appreciate the invitation from the Washington, D.C. section, and I'd be happy to respond to your questions as time permits today. And I'm showing my email address on the screen in case you'd like to follow up with additional questions or comments following today's presentation.
With that being said, Jonathan, thank you so much for preparing this presentation and the recording, and apologies for the technical difficulties today, but glad we got this worked out. I'm going to leave your email address here up on the screen in case folks wanted to save that, since we'll be able to get to a couple questions today. Given that we started a little bit late, if folks are able to hang on until a little bit after 1 o'clock, and Jonathan, that includes you, if you're able to do so, that'd be great. We'll try to cover a couple of the questions here and then direct a couple of them offline. We will save the chat and coordinate those questions through you so folks can get answers if they're curious. But if you're ready to go into a couple of questions, one came through a little while ago from Jeff. How will the 11th edition of the MUTCD address state DOT use of changeable message signs to convey humorous safety messages with pop culture references? This one came out earlier in the week, and Jeff, I saw that what you were talking about with clever messages to get someone's attention from movie quotes, TV songs, other pop culture. Jonathan, anything that you might know about that?
That's a good question, Adam. And I'm presuming you can hear me okay.
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay. Well, I know Federal Highway Administration from time to time has issued, perhaps it's official rulings or other advice, discouraging messages of the sort that you mentioned, reflecting pop culture or humor or whatever. But in spite of that, I think there's some in the community that think that type of messaging can be effective. I don't recall that there was anything in the notice of proposed amendments that dealt specifically with that particular issue. So I don't know that, I don't know if we'll see anything in a final rule that addresses that particular question. And I think that's the best that I can say in response to the question.
Okay. That's something we can certainly keep an eye on. I know a lot of folks in the Mid-Colonial District have seen those in places like Delaware. Pennsylvania sometimes gets a little bit clever with them. I've seen them in Maryland too, occasionally. Delaware seems to be up on that pretty consistently, but I appreciate the response to that. I think that's pretty interesting context for getting close to the final rule. Another question we had come in a little while back from Laura regarding the distance ahead warning signs. aren't many of the distance ahead warning signs attempting to warn people that they need to find an alternate route before they get to their location. For example, if there's 46 miles to a location where trucks are restricted and a viable turnoff exists within, say, the next 3 miles, wouldn't that be an appropriate location for that distance ahead warning?
Well, I think Laura makes a good point. Uh, in terms of the truck sign that said 46 miles ahead, no trucks. Uh, there literally are really no other alternative routes that you might come to during the course of the 46 miles in that particular location. So at that particular location, I think really the message that we're trying to convey is this is right here is a good place to turn around and go find some other alternate route other than the roadway that you're on.
Sure. I think it's helpful to put in that context as well. Um, Another question that came in on the QR codes. This is something that I was thinking about during the presentation, but Laura followed up with an additional thought. You mentioned in the presentation that the NPA is going to include language on QR codes for signs. Have you heard anything on whether that's guaranteed to make it into the final rule? Of course, we know a lot of the content's likely to make it, but there's always a chance that Federal Highway makes a decision behind closed doors and changes based on some of the comments from the NPA or their own judgment calls. And partially on the QR codes question, because as Laura mentions, for pedestrian and bicycle wayfinding signs, these QR codes could be extremely helpful in some situations. Any thoughts on that?
Well, you've mentioned a number of different points there, Adam. First of all, this provision did appear in the notice of proposed amendments. It did go out for public comment. I don't know if there were any comments that came back from the public on that particular proposal. We literally don't know for sure whether any of the 600 some proposals in the NPA will actually appear in a final rule. It's really all dependent on comment and input from the public and perspectives that come in from other organizations or individuals. So none of the items in the NPA are guaranteed to appear in the final rule, i.e. in the next edition of the manual. And I guess I also would like to note, you used the phrase behind closed doors, and I don't perceive FHWA to be making decisions unilaterally without input from the public. I think the whole purpose of the public process for rulemaking is to make sure that all points of view are considered and that good decisions in the end are made for what's included in the MUTCD. I think you also made the observation there may be instances on non-roadway locations, such as on walking paths or bicycle facilities, where the safety issue might be not as risky as displaying a QR code on a public roadway. And that's an interesting observation. I don't recall exactly how the proposal was worded in the NPA, if it applied to shared pathways as well as roadways. We could certainly look that up and find out, or simply wait until the final rule comes out and see what it says.
Right. Great points there, Jonathan. A couple of other thoughts, if you have a few minutes, actually, on some of those things. And your point on behind closed doors, I'm not usually the one best for words. I appreciate you pointing that out to make sure that it is a transparent process. Another question came in on the final rule. In your opening, you mentioned that it's likely to be published in May, and I know a lot of people ask this question. In your opinion, what's the likelihood the final rule gets out on time?
Well, we do have a provision in the bipartisan infrastructure bill that instructs Federal Highway Administration to issue a new edition by May 15th. But the process is not entirely in Federal Highway Administration's control. There are many steps in the process. Just as examples, when Federal Highway Administration is comfortable with what it wants to recommend, each of the other modal administrations in DOT have a chance to weigh in and provide some feedback. So that's a step that requires some time. The Office of Management and Budget is involved in rulemaking processes. Office of Management and Budget, theoretically has up to 90 days to do their part in reviewing a final rule. I don't know that the Office of Management and Budget always accomplishes a review within 90 days. It's possible it could take longer. More recently, this rulemaking has been reclassified as a significant rulemaking. I'll put that in quotes. That has a particular meaning. But among other things, it means that it's subjected to more scrutiny when it gets to the Office of Management and Budget. So there are a lot of factors in play here. Each of the steps in the process has to be carried out. And whether we see a final rule by May 15th, I simply can't predict.
I don't know if anybody can. We make our best guess. Are you okay hanging on for a couple more minutes since we started the presentation around 1:10?
Absolutely.
All right, I'll hang on for a few more minutes. We'll try to get to some of these questions. And again, for everyone who's still with us, for any of those that we don't get to in the next 5 minutes, we will do our best to share them with Jonathan and get a response. And we can share his answers with everyone in the coming weeks. So going back real quick to the question on the alternate route signing that advanced distance signs, for example, truck turnoff, someone asked, is there a compliant use alternate route warning sign that could be used? I believe that's the case, but I'm curious if you're, what you think about that.
Well, I think under the provision that agencies can create their own word message signs, certainly there could be a word message sign suggesting use of an alternate route that could be posted on the roadway. It could, in fact, even suggest an appropriate alternative route.
Okay. Helpful to know, and a reminder of some of the flexibility agencies have. A question from Gordon: what kind of research documentation will support MUTCD specifications? You spoke about public input, but public input is often incorrect on the correlation of design and safety. An interesting thought there.
Well, I think Federal Highway Administration and also the National Committee like to see some evidence of the effect of a device before recommending it for inclusion in the manual. And often, both the agency and the National Committee, when we formulate a recommendation, will rely on research or results of experimentation. I mentioned at the very beginning the formal process for experimentation that's available if a public agency wants to try out a new device. There is a process. It basically allows for a simple yet we hope robust evaluation through deployment in the field.
Mm-hmm.
And it's results from those kinds of studies that I think help all of us to judge whether something new is worthy of being included in the manual.
Right. Great, thanks, Jonathan. One more question that just came through a couple minutes ago, and this is tied to the points that you made on maintenance, but in a little bit of a different light. It's from Philip, and the question asks, can signs be removed if put up by the public and not on their property? So I'm guessing, I'm interpreting that to mean if a member of the public puts up a sign that's not within their private property, or I guess it could also be interpreted as if a public agency happens to install it outside of their right of way. I know there's a lot of intricacies with that, but I'm interpreting it the first way. But if you want to interpret it either way, totally up to you.
Well, I believe in one of those slides, I did quote a provision. I don't remember the text exactly, but I believe it says something about signs posted within the right-of-way, not by the public agency, constitute a public nuisance and should be removed. So there is that provision in the manual. And I hope I'm getting to the gist of the question that was posed there.
I just read it the long way. It just said, if can signs be removed if put up by the public and not on their property? So it sounds like Philip just responded, yes, your interpretation was correct. So you answered the right question that was intended to be asked. So appreciate that. I'm just checking one last run here in our chat. There were a number of good questions. Checking our Q&A again. A couple folks used that, so I think we covered everything. My only other question was from way earlier in the presentation. Don't want to steal anyone's thunder. You had that road narrow sign and the rocks across the roadway. Yes, it abruptly narrows. Is that from fallen rocks? Do you happen to remember from when you saw that, if the road was temporarily blocked, that it wasn't just like a road end with an incorrect sign?
Well, I believe the road narrows sign existed there before a rockfall took place.
Okay.
I believe the road did narrow somewhere downstream from there, and it did happen that there was a rockfall. So conditions changed, and that sign obviously no longer appropriate. I do not recall that any other warning had been put in place at that location.
You do what you can. Well, it looks like per our chat, that's everything that we have, but a lot of very warm messages that I think I can agree with. That thank you for your time and the presentation, all the insights, all the prep in getting to this point today with such a large audience. Seems like everyone's very appreciative. Again, for those who are still here, just a friendly reminder, find our websites for WDC Site, MASITE, and the Mid-Colonial District. Take a look at the Mid-Colonial District annual meeting in April. We'll also have content on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram between the sections in the district as well. The recording will be available on the WDC Site YouTube channel within the next couple of weeks, and a notice will be sent out for that. You'll also get an email to process your PDHs using a survey that'll come from the WDC Site email, hopefully before the end of the month. If any other questions, feel free to reach out to Jonathan through the email on the screen. You can also reach out to me or anyone on the WDC Site board or the other ITE sections and districts. Thanks again for joining us today. Jonathan, as always, a pleasure. Good to see you. Thanks for all your help today.
Yes, thank you. And thank you everyone for attending today.
Take care, everybody. Have a good day.